Salamu ala Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome, listeners. Welcome. We are live on Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton. This is 87.8 FM if you are within the Wolverhampton area. Otherwise, we are available online all over the planet. MashaAllah, Ramadan has come, another beautiful month, alhamdulillah, in 2023. And Radio Ramadan has come back as well. So we are here to entertain, inspire, and educate. That's the focus of Radio Ramadan in Wolverhampton. Now, today, my program in conversation with Yusuf Shafi, I've been joined by Brother Yasir Birni, who, mashallah, is a very eloquent and very able gentleman. He's been involved in a number of things around medical engineering. I think his main qualifications were around medical engineering. So, Brother Yasir, I'll let you introduce yourself first of all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to all listeners and to you, Brother Yusuf. Yes, my name is Yasir Birni. I've been living in Wolverhampton for over 12 years now.
MashaAllah.
My basic profession is medical engineering, and I worked as a lecturer in biomedical engineering in university back in Pakistan. And here I worked in NHS, other field service role as a medical engineer. But currently I'm doing my own business in Science Park, named as Biomed 96 Salim Medical Equipments.
Mm-hmm.
Also enrolled in PhD, doing cybersecurity. And this is my area of interest. To give something back to the community, the education.
But today we're not going to be talking much about biomedical engineering.
Yeah, exactly.
We will be talking more so about the world of evolution.
Yeah.
Evolution is our topic of conversation today. We will have a program, a 1 hour inshallah, where we're going to try to, between myself and Brother Yasir, we will try to bring the basic concepts, get the basic ideas of what evolution is all about and how we can react and understand it better from the Quran, from the point of view of the Quran. So let's make headway with this, Brother Yasir. So we learned from school that there is a concept of speciation.
Yeah.
Species are formed, and those species will come about from one to another to another. The concept of a common ancestry. So all living organisms on planet Earth, whether they be amoeba, whether they be bacteria, whether they be fungi, plant or human or animal, they all have a common ancestor, a little organism that was found in a little pond somewhere billions and billions of years ago. And then zap, suddenly it came to life. What's your view on that?
Well, as you know, and the listeners know, that Charles Darwin was the first one to introduce this theory when he was traveling to an island.
The Galapagos Islands.
Galapagos. In his ship MHS Beagle in 1835. That's where he discovered this different form of species. And then his theory is based on the recent discovery of the fossils of human being dated 100,000 years ago, millions years ago. So that's, again, we cannot deny that it doesn't happen, okay? Because we found those fossils, we have the evidence of those fossils, which is dated back 1 million years ago.
Okay, so when you say we can't deny it doesn't happen, what you're talking about is the process of natural selection. Because that's what natural selection was all about at the Galapagos Islands, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think the concept goes that Darwin studied the finches, the birds, and he looked at their beaks, and he identified how different species are different only because of their beaks. The rest of them are all the same. And he based that on the idea that different birds were on different islands and able to locate different types of foods from different locations within the islands, and so were best suited with different shape of beaks. If they needed to go into the soil, for example, they had a sharp beak.
Yeah.
If they needed to sit on a tree and eat berries, they had more rounded beak to support them opening their mouths and eating the round berries. And over thousands and thousands of years, they only mated with the other finches who had a similar, better structured beak than themselves, and therefore you got what is called natural selection. That natural selection resulted in what he called then evolution, which resulted in species which no longer mated with each other and became different species.
Mm-hmm.
We take that basic idea and we then take it forward and start saying, Therefore, if a finch can change into different species of finch, a ape can become a human. Now, is that too much of an extrapolation? Is that too much of a jump for us to make from that basic concept which we accept and agree that natural selection does take place and cause variation, but then to talk about that resulting in a brand new species coming about?
So, you're right about the finches and the birds and their beaks. They go short, long, round, depending upon the area and the soil. So if we go like the reverse engineering, okay, from today and go back to trace it back ourselves to the amoeba, or just one living organism, okay. The first thing we need to know is we can accept, okay, there is one organism from one species. It emitted or is just generated 2 or 3 species of different kind. The first thing for any species to survive and get along during the time is the reproduction. Okay, and the species does not do this or have a sense of eating, mating, all this which is necessary for a species to survive. They need a brain. Okay, so the first thing after the reproduction of other species from one organism, we need a brain in those species. Okay, and there was no such evidence that those species, okay, they have a brain to mutate, and in the later form they just from birds, fish, animals, and the last form was the mankind. So there was no evidence of that. Okay, but again, going back to the fossils, okay, we know fossils are discovered by the layers in the fossils. That's how the geologists, they discover and they find out the history of the any building, fossils, or the bones. But again, it's based on their calculation, and no calculation is like accurate. They cannot say like this has happened in that particular area. So it could be thousands of years, millions of years, okay. But we do not know the exact date. So my main point.
So let me just interrupt you on this. So the idea of the fossil evidence is the fossil evidence show bones,
Yeah.
or they show structures which were embedded in mud,
Yeah.
and then fossilized over thousands and thousands of years and became solid stones, and then you can see the shapes of the organisms. And what the fossil evidence shows is similarity. You can see an organism which existed 10,000 years ago and existed a million years ago, and you could see how one was very, very similar to another. Now, that is again an evidence for common ancestry.
Yeah.
The idea that they had, therefore, a single organism which was responsible for both of their evolution, and that led to the different evolution of those two different species. But of course, the argument from a point of view of evolution itself is that, of course, you have what is called divergent evolution, which is what we're talking about there, how a species can go into 2 different directions. But of course, conversely, there is convergent evolution as well. And in convergent evolution, what we've got is because the environment is the same, you actually end up with similar forms, because the environment is what determines natural selection. So it's the temperature of the air, the windfall, the wind speed, the rainfall, the level of light you have present, the predators that are in the location, the types of food that is available to the organism, the types of nutrients in the soil, in the rivers, and all of those things. That's the environment. So that environment will therefore determine the structures of the morphology, the shapes of the different organisms. So to see commonality, to say we've got the same type of organism existing here, and it's similar to something that existed 50,000 years before it, doesn't necessarily mean common ancestry. It actually does mean they have the same environment.
Yeah.
So, for example, humans and apes have got, I think, about 97% of our DNA exactly the same.
97 to 99,
Yeah.
some say 99,
Exactly.
yeah.
So the argument, therefore, is common ancestry. The apes were, therefore, the ancestors of humans. But no, it isn't that. Actually, what it is more likely to be is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he was creating his creation, he created it with very similar features which are fit for this environment. So you need two eyes, you need to have a nose, you need to have a mouth, you need to have a reproductive system, a digestive system, a respiratory system, and those types of different parts of your body. And they need to be fit for the human, for planet Earth, which has a certain concentration of oxygen, which has a certain level of light, which has a certain temperature, which has a certain wind speed, and all of those things. So it makes sense, therefore, to make common structures present in both chimpanzees, in donkeys, in humans, in your fish, in your kangaroos, and everything else, because they are fit for this environment. They work in this environment. Yeah. And that's where we can talk about common ancestry and defy it. We can prove it to be essentially not relevant, because common ancestry doesn't necessarily mean similarity of structure doesn't necessarily mean we've got a common ancestor. So you and I have got two eyes. The cat has got two eyes as well, because two eyes works. Mm-hmm. Two eyes is sensible. Yeah. That's why we've both got two eyes. It's not because we've got a common ancestor. And from that point of view, from the point of view of evolution, I often think to myself, well, we could have had 6 eyes. Mm. And from an evolutionary point of view, it would have been better because we would have seen more around us if we had 6 eyes. Mm-hmm. But we never evolved 6 eyes. We only evolved 2 eyes. 2 eyes, yeah. So Allah Ta'ala made us and wanted us to have 2 eyes, not 6. But you could argue 6 would have been better. So if Allah wasn't involved, if he wasn't involved, then we're talking about how 6 eyes would have been better evolutionarily. Right. So there's a lot of things around the fossil evidence which you were related to, which I think is not necessarily proving evolution. One other concept that I do want to bring out before we get into the depth of it is, because we don't want to lose our audience. What is the difference between the creation of life, which is called biogenesis, and evolution?
Okay, so I'll start from before Adam alayhi salam. We read that in Quran that Allah once gathered all the arwah, okay, all the ruh, okay, me, you, people before us, okay, Pharaoh, Namrud, President of USA, everyone was there, from Adam alayhi salam to the last man who will be born on earth. Okay, they will all gather together. All the ruhs were gathered together, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them, Alastu bi rabbikum. And all of us, including Pharaoh, Namrud, Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, all these people who are here in the past or will come, they all said, Qalu bala. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the ruh before creating a man. Okay. And then when the time comes, Allah make their body, and the ruh is sent into that body, and then we will shift from heaven or from the alam to this world, from the alam-e-arwah to this alam-e-dunya, and then we'll go to alam-e-barzakh, and then we'll go to alam-e-akhirat. So these are the stages. So what happened is, we need this body to, like you said, we need this environment on earth to survive. So Allah given us this body. Okay, so ruh was created, and ruh will never die. Mm-hmm. So Allah has given this body. You can, in the modern terminology, you can say this is our avatar for this dunya. Okay, because when we go in the Jannah, right, Allah says you will have the height of Adam alayhi salam. You will have the beauty of Yusuf alayhi salam, you have the life of Isa alayhi salam, and you have the akhlaq of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So definitely our body will be different. So there might be a different avatar. Mm-hmm. So when we are buried in the qabr, we change. We just change into the skeleton. So when we will be resurrected in the day of judgment, we will be in different forms. So that will be avatar for this form. So going back to the evolution, let's understand this concept of by the dominoes effect. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have seen so many videos. I'm sure the listener have seen so many beautiful dominoes videos on YouTube. So let's say the dominoes effect started. Okay, the first one from one organism, one species, and it's going through until the last domino. Okay, which was the human. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we believe Darwin's theory, okay, we say, okay, the human or the mankind evolved from one species, and for argument's sake, they have a brain and they mutate and they mate, and finally, the last step was man. Okay, so again, go back to the Quran, where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala said, "Kul inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa." Okay, I'm going to send a naib, a khalifa, or my servant in this dunya. Okay, and me and you were discussing about that the angel said, "Wallah, you creating someone who will
Spill blood.
spill blood." And you asked me, how do you know? And I told you it's because there was a shayateen, there was jinnat who were before mankind in this world. Okay, like the dinosaurs, we cannot say dinosaur doesn't exist because we find their bones, we find their skeletons. So dinosaurs were there before men.
Of course.
So then what happened is, so if you say, okay, till that point, okay, the species evolve, and one ape, they give birth, which has a closer DNA to man, and then they give birth to another ape whose characteristics are increasing 5-10%, and finally, when there was a 99%, so then Allah Subhanahu wa Taala decided, okay, I'm going to create this man. Okay, but there's 2-3 things, okay, we need to consider. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says in the Quran, "Qul ruhu min amri Rabbi." Okay, ruh is the amr of Allah. Okay, so and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala again said, "Laqad khalaqna al-insana fi ahsani taqweem." Okay, we created humans very, very beautiful. Okay, so no ape or no monkey, okay, is very beautiful. Okay.
Well, they may be beautiful towards each other, but not for us.
Not for us.
Not for us.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the point you're trying to make here is this, you're saying the jump between the most cleverest of apes to the human cannot be explained by evolution, because there's no chimpanzee who can sit here in a radio station and talk to each other about these types of things. Or, for example, the chimpanzee isn't going to write the works of Shakespeare, or the chimpanzee isn't going to be able to develop the internet or get to the moon or anything like that. So I think the point you're trying to make is you're saying that the gap between the most complexity of the apes and the most intelligent of the apes and the most able of the apes to the human is a massive gap. And that gap can't be explained by evolution. There's no species in between.
Yeah, again, that is yeah, you're absolutely right. We found the evidence, okay, from the first species, and then we just jumped back to the humans. So there is no evidence of evolution in between. No one till this date. Yes. Maybe they find it after today they will find. But till that, there's no evidence of the middle era. So it's very strange that people find something which is at the start. So if we go back in the geology prospects, so if something's created first, should be buried down. And something evolved from it should be up on the layer, on the ground, on the earth. So it's very strange that we found something which was being created first, and the rest of them we just couldn't find. And we just from first stage, we just reached to the last stage, which is humanoids or Homo sapiens.
So, mashallah, Allah Ta'ala has created human beings as a special creation, and it is clearly evident from the fossil records, from evolution itself, from the old study of natural selection. We can see that there's nothing else like human beings on the planet. And from that point of view, yes, we understand and we accept that natural selection takes place. Yes, we can say variation takes place. And we know that because our children are different to us. And that's a very basic level of change, variation. But what we are saying is that it's not significant enough to have resulted in a brand new species which would then be able to be like human beings. So, mashallah, we're coming up to our adhan time for Zohr, which will be in about 20 seconds. We will continue with this discussion and try to elaborate further after the adhan. So, listeners, stay with us. You're listening to Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton, 87.8 FM in Wolverhampton, and we are online all over the planet. Join us in a few minutes after this azan. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. You're listening to Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton 87.8 FM within the locality and online as well. MashaAllah, we've got in conversation with Yusuf Shafi. And today I'm joined by my guest, Brother Yasir Birnie. And we're talking about evolution and the concepts around evolution and what our views are and how Islam views evolution and natural selection, and also how science itself actually makes a lot of provides a lot of contradictory evidence around the theories of evolution. So before we go back to Brother Yasir, I just wanted to elaborate on one or two things with regards to the whole concepts of what is called biogenesis and abiogenesis. From the point of view of science, the idea is that we have the creation of life. Bio is life and genesis is to create. Now, in order to have life, you need to have life beforehand. Life begets life. And this is something which you find in the Bible, this is something you find in the Torah, in the Quran, and everywhere else. Very simple concept that in order to reproduce, you need something there in the first place. You need to have a cell to begin with that replicates. Now, there is a concept, therefore, of abiogenesis, which is the production of life without life. So, abio, not biological genesis, creation of life without life. And that is the prelude, really. That is the key idea behind how it is said that life came on this planet. The theory goes, the idea is that there existed atoms, there existed molecules, and those molecules were present in a pond. That pond was present somewhere on planet Earth. It had a certain temperature, it had an environment which was possibly oxygen rich, possibly not, who knows. It had a certain level of temperature from the atmosphere. There was possibly lightning going on. So there were thunderclouds, and the thunderclouds would clap, and that would result in the production of lightning, and electrical impulse could hit that pond. So the theory is that what happened is atoms of carbon, atoms of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, possibly, were all provided with a zap of energy. That zap of energy resulted in the production of what are called amino acids. Now, amino acids are thought to be the building blocks of life because you need an amino acid to build a protein. Proteins are enzymes, and enzymes are then busy little machines that go around and produce life and produce all the cell structures and allow cells to replicate and everything else. In theory, given enough time, given enough millions and billions of years, you could get the orientation of certain atoms in a certain way and zap it with the right level of light at the right temperature and the right wind speed and everything else and produce an amino acid. And if you keep producing amino acids, they will join each other, they will form a protein, and that protein becomes what we call a self-replicating unit. That protein starts making other proteins, and those proteins start making cells, and we form lipids. Lipids start forming membranes, and suddenly you've got your first cell of life. That first cell of life then is able to miraculously replicate. So a whole load of orchestra of different things all miraculously come together. The analogy that's often given is you've got a junkyard of scrap metal and the wind blows and suddenly you produce a Mercedes-Benz, or the best car on the planet is produced from that. And it's all random and it's all given the eons of time that exist. And thereby you've got abiogenesis. Thereby you've actually created life. You've created a self-replicating cell. And then, assuming natural selection, that will be favored by the environment in certain forms, and then variations will take place. And lo and behold, you've got higher animals, and you've got humans, and you've got everything else, all the plants and animals that exist on the planet. What's the argument against all of this? Well, of course, we've got, and Brother Yasir will highlight a number of aspects of the Quran and other books of faith, for example, the Bible and the Torah, which will clearly say, no, this is rubbish and it didn't happen like that. But I don't want to be using those as a source of evidence, because the argument, therefore, is that, A'udhu billah, what if the Quran itself isn't right? And as Muslims, of course, we don't accept that. But we need to refute science with science, not refute science with Quran. So, the other aspect of science is, of course, the concept of entropy. Now, entropy is a theory of an understanding from the world of chemistry and physics more so, but it's the idea that everything in the universe is expanding, and alhamdulillah, our Quran also explains that as well, and verifies the concept that everything is expanding. But what you have got is increasing chaos. Everything moves to a level of increasing chaos. Things deteriorate. Things don't come together. Things don't become more complex. They become more chaotic, and they become more disorganized on our planet. And that's the natural events that take place. What therefore allows for things to become more complex, things to become more better, things to become more organized, is energy. If you put energy into a system, that then goes into the opposite direction and pushes things to become more better. And that energy is the input of Allah. That is the Creator who has actually put that energy into our system. Otherwise, this first cell which had formed, would, according to the rules of entropy, would start to break up, would start to deteriorate. And those molecules actually would never form. Those atoms that form those molecules and form the amino acids would never form either. What would actually happen is you would get deterioration and atoms and molecules breaking away and forming off from each other. We, of course, go further, and then those cells become bigger cells. It becomes multicellular, results in the production of fish, for example, and the fish start swimming, and then they say those fish come onto land, and then they start evolving, and lo and behold, you've got human beings. This type of negative entropy, as it wouldn't exist according to physics. It wouldn't happen. More likely, the laws of physics would say that things would deteriorate and things would spread out and things would become more chaotic. So evolution isn't supported by physics for that reason. You have there a concept where, in effect, we're looking at an artificial environment that has to be created to keep all of those atoms arranged in a certain way, to produce that first cell, and then to allow that cell to replicate, and then that results in higher organisms. And that can only come from a creator. That can also come from being outside of this planet who decided, I want these organisms, I want these cells to develop in a certain line. And it has to, in effect, that form of evolution proves the existence of God. It doesn't deny the existence of God. It tells you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was here, He was present, and He made that evolution, that variation take place. If you want to go to the line of saying that it did result in evolution and evolution is true, it is the way of Allah that it would have happened. It couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened without an external force providing energy and directing that evolution to a certain way. So, mashallah, we've got this concept of biogenesis and abiogenesis. And listeners, if this is something that inspires you, you should try to research further on these things, because it's very easy to fall down the trap of being told evolution denies God. Well, no, it doesn't. Evolution from that point of view proves the existence of God, because to create this marvelous human beings and all the other, mashallah, beautiful creations that we have on planet Earth, it would only come together because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we were talking before the break, before the azan, the whole idea of those missing bits of information, those millions of years of fossil evidence that just doesn't exist and explain the gaps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must have been there, was there, alhamdulillah, was there in order to create this human being. So, we then have other concepts and ideas around evolution where it falls flat, because we don't, for example, have the evidence that there's a whole kingdom called, the name forgets me now, the Proctoctista. Now, the Proctoctista are a kingdom of life, unlike the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. You've also got these organisms which basically have got weird and wonderful forms, their morphology, their structures, their characteristics. You can't place them into any particular kingdom. They're all the oddballs, really. How did they evolve? How did they come about? Science isn't able to explain all the oddities that exist. So again, if you look at the protists and you look at those types of organisms, what you see there is a whole example of billions and billions of different species that exist, which don't fit any type of commonality. They don't lead to any common ancestry from that point of view. So that's just some examples of how we can defy evolution from science, and we can explain why actually, even though variation does take place, even though the environment is responsible for natural selection, and it is responsible for making changes within a species, it doesn't lead to speciation. It doesn't lead to a whole brand new species coming about. I want to bring in Brother Yasser now to elaborate on some of those things and make some examples from the Quran and from different concepts within Islam as well.
Well, you're absolutely spot on that. Let's start with this theory of evolution. Have you ever heard something in any book about the fact of evaluation?
No, exactly. It's a theory, isn't it?
It's a theory of evaluation. So when Darwin, he was on Galapagos Island, he wrote a letter to his friend Thomas. And he said that I don't believe in natural selection, okay, or I don't believe in this theory of evaluation. I only support it because it'll help me understand the morphology and embryology and the human organs. And even in his book, Rise of the Humans, or Rise of the Species, in the end he mentioned that even if all the organisms go back to one organism, okay, one species, then there is a creator for that one species, which helped evolve the other species after that. So again, he wasn't denying the God. He was just presenting the theory what he sees based on the evidence. But because of the Galileo incident before him, the church, they sentenced him to death. So most of the scientists, okay, which Pope now recently apologized about his death sentence. So most of the scientists, they supported Darwin's theory just because it was against the church, because the church was against this theory, so they all supported it. But Darwin himself, he wrote this letter, he mentioned in his book that even if it's one species, like you were saying, life has to come from life, okay? So any species, to have a life, they must reproduce, okay? And even they should transform, even if it's a negligible amount, they should mutate. And that mutation in the last stage should be diverse and ability to survive in this environment, which is to humanly, and now this modern technology, it's not possible. Okay, so going back to the Quran, okay, Allah said, "This world I made, okay, it's a system I made. Okay, I was a hidden treasure, and I wanted to be found, so I created this. I created these humans, okay, to go on this earth, okay, and there is a system, okay, and we all know that Iblis, he was jealous, okay, because when Allah said, "Kulli ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa," so Iblis was thinking, "Oh, it will be me because I'm more pious. I do lectures, and the Jibreel alayhi salam sits in that lecture." So he was like, "Yeah, it's me. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the Adam alayhi salam, and he saw that, so he was like, at that moment, he was really, really jealous since then. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, okay, because the angels, they argued with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are sending someone who will spread violence on this earth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you don't know which I know, okay? And then when the ruh was put into Adam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked few questions from angels, and they couldn't answer. It's like a buzzer round. So none of the angels, including Iblis, who think he was a big alim, couldn't answer. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the same question to Adam alayhi salam, and he answered. Okay. So again, that sense, that wisdom, okay, and ability to understand, okay, that is not present in the animals. Okay. So if you ask animals a question, what is your name? The animal won't say. Okay. They got their own languages, okay, but they don't build homes, okay. They don't go to work, okay. They don't build or leave the inheritance for their cubs, yeah. But in fact, some of the animals, lions, and other animals, they kill their cubs. as a food. Okay, but that is the difference between the humans, okay, and the animals. Ape is an animal. Okay, so again, if we say okay, 99%, okay, DNA is similar to the apes. Okay, but again, that middle part which is missing, like you said, that missing link. Okay, where is that missing link? Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what said? Okay, so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Adam alayhi salam answered the question asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it shows that the human from the start has the knowledge, has been given the knowledge. Okay, because Ruh is the Amr of Allah. So Ruh was with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even before the creation of Adam alayhi salam, or even before the creation of angels. So Ruh was from Allah. All we got in this body again is the Ruh, which is the Amr of Allah. So very living. And again, you said, like, if there is a life, okay, for my amino acid, there's got to be a protein, and from miraculously it should have been transformed from fish to a horse. Okay, one lives in water, one lives in on the earth, on the soil. So it's very difficult, okay, to distinguish why it's just suddenly stopped happening, why the evolution has stopped. Okay, we give birth, okay, to the humans give birth to a human child, okay, and the apes and the monkeys, they give birth to the ape monkeys. So why does evolution, or when does this evolution stop? On why? Yeah.
Well, one other query actually is this the whole concept of gender, male and female. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains in the Quran that He's created us as male and female, and so that we may become a cover for each other, partners for each other, a support for each other, provide love and care and attention and all of those things for each other. But from an evolutionary point of view, the single species that existed, whatever it was, and as it developed, as evolution would have told us, or it tells us, why would it then want to evolve into two different genders? And not just in humans, but in every different species. So you've actually got a male and a female coming about. What is the evolutionary advantage of that? There was no evolutionary advantage of producing a female or a male if the female was first to producing a male from it, or if the male was first to producing a female from it, of the same species. So a male human, let's say female humans came first and were there for millions and millions of years, and then suddenly a male came about. Well, how did that male come about from a female? And then this interesting thing is, how did that male human then go on and produce female humans? Because we know as fathers we produce daughters, and as mothers they produce sons. How is that all happening? There's no explanation in natural selection for why you would get any evolutionary advantage, any advantage of being present in this environment by creating another version of yourself, another female version or a male version of yourself, or alternatives. And evolution has absolutely no answer to this. There is no explanation of what is the advantage of creating gender, of creating males and females of all the different species. And then having, I mean, it would be, I suppose it would make some sense from an evolutionary point of view if female cats gave birth to female cats and male cats gave birth to male cats. You could see a logic in that, but it doesn't work like that. Female cats give birth to male cats, and male cats give birth, also provide sperm for the production of female cats. And that logic doesn't work at all. That whole concept doesn't work at all. Why would you suddenly create two different species which would then need each other to produce the replication, to then come back together again effectively to produce the offspring? So there's a lot of oddities and a lot of misconceptions within the theory of evolution. And for this reason, it remains a theory. For this reason, it isn't becoming the law of evolution, and it will never be accepted as the law. I'm aware of the fact that in the United States now we've got a situation where there are many states within the USA that do not accept the theory of evolution as part of their curriculum. They've actually taken it out because there's a body of evidence now which just defies it totally. So when people who disbelieve and they say, well, evolution denies God, they are unfortunately lost. They are unfortunately they've got this misconception. And they really need to, I think, focus on the depths of evolution and really do some research around evolution. Because I know from my research days in biochemistry when I was doing my doctoral thesis, and I know you're working on your doctoral thesis at the moment, when you sit with people who are so-called international professors and people who are in the world of biological sciences, have all of the credentials and of all of the ideas and all of the understanding. Actually, when you sit with them and talk to them about these things, they are lost. They don't have these answers. But at a very basic level, they will teach you, yes, it's all evolution and God therefore doesn't exist. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Whenever I say that, I have to say the shahadat because we never want to say that. But those people will say that. Those people will say that. And those people will therefore try to profess that they have some insight. When actually, if you look at the body of research, and you can go onto YouTube and you can see so much scientific evidence which defies evolution, and nowhere does it talk about there not being a God as a result of that. I'll let you carry on, Brother Yasser. You were telling us more from the Quran and Hadith, etc.
Yeah. In 1971, there was a man called P.P. Graffi, and he was holding a chair for evolution studies in Paris. And in his conclusion in his work, he said, it is very absurd that we are finding our ancestors from the fossils. So he couldn't comprehend this theory that the humans are coming from this evolution. There's one misconcept, okay, which supports the theory of evolution. In Christianity, they believe the Adam alayhi salam, okay, starts or was born 6,000 years ago. Okay, that's the Christianity belief. We don't believe that. There's nothing mentioned in the Quran or by Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam or Sahaba or any of the Hadiths. Okay, it's none of it is mentioned that it started all 6,000 years ago. Okay, so that's a Christianity concept. Okay, so and another thing, there is a nation mentioned in the Quran. Okay, which were disobedient to Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they were catching fish on the Saturdays, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one day they were turned into the monkeys. The next morning they came up and they come to monkeys. So that's my point of view or my thought, that the people who found the fossils, okay, might be the people of them. Okay,
Yeah.
who were turned into monkeys, and that's mentioned in the Quran. So, rather from man coming from monkeys, so you might turn into monkeys, and that might be the fossils found by Darwin or the people. But again, going back to the Darwin, he himself denies his theory, because at that point, okay, he was never denying the existing or concept of God. Okay, because he said if the first species which was alive and which miraculously created all these species, and like you were saying, into genders as well. So whenever that first species created another species, that another species must be thinking, I have a brain, okay, to reproduce, I need opposite gender. Okay, so could be a fish first thing generated, could be a horse, and that thing, okay, I need to reproduce something which is similar but opposite in sex, so I can reproduce. So, but that first thing which was present, like you said, life is always came from life. Okay, so that first thing, even if we believe in the evolution theory, we go back, that first thing who started generating these species, that was alive. Okay. And that was alive. So the life must have been come from someone or somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. So even if you believe, okay, that's how the world has evolved. Okay. But that first species, the life, the root in it
needed to be created.
Yeah, it needed to be created.
It needed to be created, and therefore there is a creator. Alhamdulillah.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Therefore there is a creator.
Yeah.
And of course, the other idea is, of course, well, fine, wonderful. Where did the water come from? Where did the planet come from? Where did this universe come from? Where did our sun come from? Where did the galaxy come from? That wasn't evolution. Evolution explains if it does and it doesn't. It does it poorly. it poorly explains the development of life on the planet. It doesn't explain where Saturn came from, where Jupiter came from, where Earth came from. It doesn't explain where, the whole solar system has originated from. That wasn't evolution, because these things aren't living. So the whole concept of God is never denied by a simple idea of evolution. No. And all I would impress on listeners is, we're coming towards the end of the show now. I would impress on listeners, please try to do research, learn, ask, inquire. You'll find there's a wealth of learning to be done available on both the internet, both on YouTube, both on books, and speak to your ulama as well. And our ulama especially, they should have an understanding of this as well. They should try to research and find out. Because it's very, very easy, and it's very, very lazy from that point of view to simply say, well, the whole world is therefore come about by evolution, and therefore we can disprove God. It's not the case, and most scientists won't be able to actually stand on those grounds and be able to disprove God in that way. Unfortunately, it is the work of Shaitan. It is Shaitan who will beguile us, who will send us to this idea that God is not existent because of the fact that evolution explains it, and there's some great theory out there, some really clever people have come out with, and it explains everything. Unfortunately not, it doesn't explain anything at all. So from that point of view, I would impress upon listeners to please focus on these things, try to encourage more research about these things, but fundamentally we have our Quran, we have our Deen, and it inspires us, and it explains so much more about this dunya and about life on this planet, far more than one simple theory like evolution can do. Brother Yasser, we've come to the last minute. Do you want to make any departing comments? Literally 30 seconds.
I just second your comments, because Shaitan is the enemy of man. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions so many times in the Quran, Aduvum Mubin, he is your worst enemy. And that's again, Shaitan wants us to deny the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once anyone denies the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they denies everything, Jannah, Dozakh, the day of the resurrection, the life in Qabr. And it makes them easy to do whatever they want in dunya without being accountable.
Jazakumullah khair, listeners. This is Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton 87.8 FM. You've been listening to Yusuf Shafi. I was in conversation with Brother Yasser Birni. Brother Yasser Birni, you were going to continue with your program on inventions in Quran. So, mashallah, it'll be a beautiful program coming up just after the break. Please continue to listen to our programs every Saturday from 11 o'clock onwards, 12 o'clock onwards even, and listen to all the other programs of Radio Ramadan Wolverhampton. Here to serve the community, inspire, educate, and entertain. Jazakallah khair and Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.